listen to the Indiana basketball funeral. Oh, hold on. I'm in the wrong room. I need to go over here for a second. Okay, we're back. Yeah, welcome into In Touch with Indiana Sports, powered by HoosierIllustrated.com. I mean, I guess it's really not that much different, and I don't know if that was even that clever of an intro. The production value on this show is fairly limited, minus the beautiful microphone that I have here. But yeah, that's what we're going to talk about a lot today. Indiana basketball, as you could imagine. Poor performance, at least when it comes to, the team aspect of things. And yeah, we're going to dive into, we're not going to dive into every aspect of what happened last night, but as you can imagine, we'll talk a lot of big picture stuff, what happens moving forward, that sort of thing. Anyway, again, welcome into In Touch with Indiana Sports, powered by HoosierIllustrated.com. John Alden is with you. I am he, as always. No guests today. It's been a while since we've done a guest list show, and that wasn't necessarily by design. It's just the way things work out sometimes. Planning to make it up to you by doubling up on guests on Friday. Can't promise that, but that's kind of the plan for now. We'll see how that works out. But yeah, you just got me today. We may not even go the full hour that I usually do, just because, filling an hour where you're just sitting here talking to yourself. Maybe some people can make that look easy, like, guys like Colin Cowherd or Rush Limbaugh, or even my buddy Nick Coffey down here in the Louisville area. They can sit there and talk to themselves like it's natural ability. And I guess it is. But I can't dabble in that sort of wizardry the way that they do. But yeah, either way, I'm going to sit here. We're going to react to Indiana basketball. I'm going to go over some of your YouTube comments. So I guess I'm not fully alone. I've got your guys' thoughts as well on where things are at. And yeah, we'll go ahead and kick off, tip off, however you want to refer to it as, this here Indiana basketball funeral. A wake. I would call it a celebration of life, but there's not a lot of life within the Indiana men's basketball team right now. So if you happen to miss the game, or you didn't catch last night's post-game wrap-up show with Kyler Staley and Drew Rosenberg, feel free to check that out as well for their immediate reactions on what happened. Of course, you guys know the lowdown of how things go whenever I'm not available for a post-game wrap-up show. It's usually because it's a late one. It was 9:00 tip, and yours truly gets up at 3 a.m. every day, as I believe I've made you guys aware many a time by this point. So what we have left here is Indiana falls on the road at Wisconsin, 76-64. Falling to 14-9 overall, 5-7 in the Big Ten. And this one was ugly from the beginning. And we've already beaten to death the ridiculousness that is this losing streak to Wisconsin on the road. I mean, dating all the way back to January 25th, 1998 was the last time that any single Indiana team had been able to win at the Kohl Center, the inaugural season of the Kohl Center, by the way. And last night, going into it, I really had a good feeling about how they would perform. Not necessarily that they would win, but of course, I think we all tend to base our expectations on what will happen on what the previous result was like, right? Like, for example, if we're talking about what happened before the Wisconsin game and you look at what happened against Purdue, you would imagine Indiana should be able to carry some of that positive momentum into this game against Wisconsin. Well, that didn't happen at all. They got down by as many as 20 points early. I think it was 24-4 at one point. Yeah, 24-4 by the 14-minute mark, 6 minutes into the game. 24-4. 24-4 for an Indiana men's basketball team against, again, and it's not like, I mean, Wisconsin has been good over the years, and they've been one of the most consistent programs in the Big Ten, at least for as old as I am. If someone who's 27 years old, I feel like Wisconsin has been one of the. I don't know if I've ever seen them have a bad season in my days of watching Big Ten, Indiana basketball, all that sort of stuff. I feel like Wisconsin has always been, near that at the very least, just middle tier of the conference, and then most of the time they're in the top 4, top 5. I mean, that's probably part of the reason why Indiana hasn't been able to beat them on the road in so long, because they're one of the most consistently good programs in Big Ten basketball. You know what they are? They're like Iowa football, because Iowa, yeah, every so often they'll have a really, really good year where they're near the top of the Big Ten in the football side of the conference, but they're never really below the middle ground. So that's just a level of consistency that you're getting with Wisconsin year in and year out. But back to what I was, I guess, originally trying to make a point about, and that is, expectations whenever you're looking at the previous result. When we were going into the Purdue game, all of us were looking at the previous way things happened against Maryland and thought, okay, well, the way they collapsed, maybe this team's just going to fold and bend over and get completely demolished by the Boilermakers. Not everybody had those thoughts, but it felt like a lot of people did. And now we're back to that with the way Indiana just could never really get anything going against Wisconsin. The game was never, I mean, the closest it was maybe, I mean, at the beginning of the game, of course, but since then, maybe just down 13, 14 points near halftime? Is that about as close as Indiana was able to get? Or towards the very end, you lose by 12. But I mean, that's the type of performance you get whenever you're playing a middling non-conference team at home. You get off to a good start, you bury them early, and never really give them a chance. Maybe they'll make a small run here and there, but that's all they ever give you. And that's what Indiana had going for them last night against the Wisconsin Badgers. I mean, I guess some of the standout performances, if we want to, I don't want to be completely doom and gloom today, even though that's kind of probably going to be the theme of a lot of Indiana shows if you decide to consume multiple ones throughout your week. But Mackenzie Mbako had a decent night, 15 points. And I'll say Mackenzie Mbako over the last few games has really begun to play a lot more consistently. And I thought that, I don't want to say that alone, but I thought that was going to be something that propelled Indiana forward. And, we almost saw it with Purdue, but he didn't get anything from Wilmar Ballo. And I mean, he didn't lay a goose egg, but he didn't really give you anything that was, his normal double style of performance. Anthony Leal gives you a goose egg. You get some decent contributions off the bench. Luke Goody with 11 points, 3 for 9 shooting. I mean, that's not the best, but it's serviceable. But when he's coming off the bench, I still, as good and consistent as Luke Goody has been, I don't understand when he's coming off the bench. I think that's just all these inconsistencies. I think it's just time we go ahead and say it. And I kind of have been getting there, but been trying not to, especially with, it was very easy to get emotionally, to be emotionally okay, right? That's not even what I'm trying to say. It was very easy to let the Purdue result kind of put a Band-Aid over things. Like, even though Indiana didn't win, whether that game ended up being a win or a loss, let's just say you won that game, but everything that happened against Wisconsin still happened. All that Purdue game is now was a Band-Aid to cover up the bigger problem. And so I'd say, even though I know the players are still going to have moments where they play hard, I know they're not going to give up. I know many of them, if not all of them, like playing for Mike Woodson, and they're going to do their best to, find a silver lining for the end of the season. And maybe they do make some sort of run. But I think it's just time that for those of us who were still hesitant to mention that this was over, and again, myself included, I think it's time just for us to go ahead and face the music, because although the Mike Woodson tenure did give us some good moments in the early seasons, the foundation that was laid was never firm enough to make this anything that was going to carry forward. And for those of you who saw the writing on the wall last year during the third season, props to you, because I was more so under um I was gonna say under the recognition. That's not really the word I'm looking for. Or I guess under the impression. I was more so under the impression that last year was just a little chink in the armor. And then, especially when you looked at how things went in the offseason, I thought Mike Woodson was going to get things back on track. And when you look at the Big Ten, where I had these pulled up, when we look at where Indiana falls currently in the Big Ten standings and where we expected them, or versus where we expected them to be, it's not complete polar opposites, because Indiana was projected top 1 or 2 team in the Big Ten based on roster alone, roster project or roster. I don't need to add another word to it. Based on their roster going into the 2024-2025 season, we thought that Indiana could figure this out, and Mike Woodson had a new formula for putting together something that could work. And maybe this roster could have worked better under a better head coach. Of course, we'll never figure that out unless this entire team sticks around, which I don't think many of them would be able to, based on eligibility restrictions alone. But the fact that this Indiana team is sitting at 5-7, and the other team that was projected to be near the top of the Big Ten with you, Purdue, is sitting at 10-2. That's it should be eye-popping enough for us to realize that this is done. Whether or not Indiana turns this around, I would say the only thing that would save Mike Woodson's job at this point, and I'm talking realistically, and this isn't even probably in the realm of realism, but let's just say Indiana snuck in the tournament and won enough games to still be on the bubble heading into the Big Ten tournament, and then they win a game or two, and then they get in the first 4. First of all, I'm going to go and say this. I don't think that's going to happen at this point. But I'm sure there are people who would tell you, like, they would lay out the map for Indy, which we've done that a few times now, and I'm aggravated enough. Not with the fact that we've done that, but I'm aggravated enough with the amount of times that we've humored that and the amount of times that they've come up short with different scenarios. That I'm done even hypothetically talking about, if Indiana can turn things around. But I guess that's what I'm doing anyway, right? The only thing that can save Woodson his job, if he sneaks in and then makes a run to past the Sweet 16. Honestly, Sweet 16 would probably even be enough for Indiana to say, you know what, we can see if this can happen again, even though it would kind of be a lucky type of run. I feel like it'd be a lucky type of a run, even if they made it past the Sweet 16, because all that would tell you is that this team figured it out. And I just don't know that you could kind of luck into that sort of situation in consecutive seasons. And the reason I think I'm stumbling over kind of this thought in my head is that I'm creating something that I know is not even real, which is Indiana making the NCAA tournament, because it's just not happening. They got Michigan coming into town this Saturday, and I've already seen a lot of people on social media, talking about the amount of boos that Mike Woodson will receive, which, my gosh, and I'm not faulting the crowd. The crowd is what it is, and you've got to face the music. If you're the head coach of a program like Indiana or anything similar, Kentucky, Louisville, Kansas, UNC, whoever it may be, if you're a head coach at one of those programs and the fans want to boo you, then I don't want to say it comes with the territory, but evidently it does now. At least at Indiana right now it does. The passion is there from the fans. You saw just a year ago, before things really fell off. Was it 2 years ago? Indiana selling out North Carolina. One of the more electric atmospheres we had seen in Assembly Hall in quite some time. So your fans will get behind you when you're doing well, but they'll let you know when they're dissatisfied. um, especially whenever they're trying to pressure the administration into doing something, even if it might be premature. And that's another thing too. Mike Woodson's not getting let go early. I think Dylan Sin had mentioned it on the show last week. The only scenario where that would even seem, remotely even close to being a possibility is if you can just tell the players have quit. And sorry for the brief pause. Really, we need to get a drink right there. But that's probably the only scenario that you see where Mike Woodson's let go before the end of the season. Otherwise, they're just going to ride it out. And I kudos to the players for playing hard. I'm sure they'll continue to do so. But anyway, with Michigan coming in this Saturday, or is it Sunday? It's the 8th. Saturday is the 8th. The 8th is Saturday. And with Dusty May, that's what I was getting into. With Dusty May being the head coach on the other sideline, of course, and a former Indiana manager under Bob Knight, has a Final Four under his belt and is having a pretty good year with Michigan. They're not near the top of the top 25 by any stretch, but they are near the top of the Big Ten, sitting squarely in third place behind Michigan State and Purdue. And with their 16-5, but many of their losses, we've talked about this with Ant Wright, are close losses to just about everybody except for their loss to Purdue, who again is at the top of the Big Ten. 3-point loss to Minnesota, 1-point loss to Oklahoma, 2-point loss to Arkansas, 2-point loss to Wake Forest. Some people can look at that and say, well, it shows you can't win the tight game. And actually, I wish I'd kept that up there, and I would try to look and see how many games he had won that were tight. And that's actually something I don't like to do, mid-show research. But there's some close wins they have. They won by 3 at Wisconsin. Well, that should already go show you one thing. I mean, people are going to look at the fact that Dusty May can get the Wisconsin monkey off of Indiana's back. I mean, he was able to do it in 1 year with Michigan, 1 by 3 at Wisconsin, 1 by 2 against Iowa. Let's see. Any other close wins against different opponents? It doesn't. No, their last 2 games were both close wins. 4-point win against Penn State and a 3-point win against Rutgers. So you can't make the argument that Dusty May can't win the close game because he's had his fair share of wins and losses in close fashion. So I'm not sitting here necessarily advocating for Dusty May, but that's going to be something that, of course, is a talking point going into this game. And I'm sure people are saying that, or I've seen some people on social media saying that you'll see Indiana fans cheering for Dusty May whenever he's announced as they're introducing him during the pregame. So, I mean, yeah, he'll certainly be a candidate whenever the head coaching job at this point inevitably opens up during the offseason. So I don't know if he'd be my first choice, but I'd be okay with it at this point. And a lot of people like to throw out like, oh, anything's better than what we've got right now. I don't think that's 100% true. As much as it might not be easy to see at this very moment, or maybe it is, I don't know, but Mike Woodson was an upgrade from Archie Miller. I mean, they both have their flaws in different ways. I mean, Archie Miller was here for 4 years, and the only time he would have gotten into the tournament, and it's still kind of an if, was the year that got canceled with COVID. And maybe he gets in, and maybe that kind of changes the trajectory of things. And that's just kind of a it's a what if that we'll never know the answer to, right? But Mike Woodson was able to take a lot of the pieces from Archie's roster and figure out how to make it work. But then after that is where things just fell off the rails. Trace Jackson Davis wouldn't have come back. Actually, I don't know that for a fact because Trace Jackson Davis didn't. I don't want to get be circling around this forever, but he either put his name in the transfer portal or he jumped into the NBA draft the moment after Archie Miller was let go, and then Mike Woodson convinced him to stay. So I don't know if Archie Miller had stuck around, if Trace Jackson Davis would have stuck around with him or not. Maybe if that's the case, he still finds his way to get into the tournament. But who knows? That's neither here nor there at this point. But it's where we are. It's where we are. We're at this juncture of the season where you've got, let's see, how many games left? I'm still looking at Michigan's schedule, so I've got to go pull up the Indiana side of things. But yeah, Indiana's got a grand total of 8 regular season games left. And if you remember the post-game wrap-up show from after the Purdue game, was our good friend and colleague, of course, Kyler Staley, had mentioned that if Indiana lost the next 3 games, of course, one of those being the game that just happened against Wisconsin, then he'd be ready to pull the plug. And of course, 2 of those games have yet to happen, Michigan and Michigan State. So I don't know if based on the result that happened last night, if any of that sentiment has changed. I just don't at this point have the belief that moving forward, that it's worth even humoring. So I'll stop blabbering and going in a circle about it, and instead, before we move on to some other matters, let's get into some YouTube comments and just kind of react to what you guys think about where things are at with Indiana basketball. Right after this break, but this break would be taking 5 or 6 seconds to take a sip of my coffee. So right after this sip, we'll continue on with the show. I also feel like I'm getting a deep breath in the midst of all this too. But yeah, welcome back. Hope you enjoyed your commercialless break right here on In Touch with Indiana Sports. Of course, powered by HoosierIllustrated.com. But let's go ahead and get into a couple of YouTube comments. And we'll start with our friend Mike Shenanigans. He says, John, you wanted me to say the things I could say that I am not going to. The reason I do not is because I am not the type of person that is going to sit back and bash the coach or the players. Fair enough, Mr. Shenanigans. Now, the administration is different, as I could. As far as getting blown out, I do not want IU getting blown out by anyone, no matter what the situation is. If Woodson is going to be gone, then he will be gone after this season. I think that's fair enough. I'll say this. I don't feel like I bash the players. Now, I'll sit there and point out when players seem to be underperforming, but I mean, I'm never going to be the type of person who, whether it be on this platform or via social media, anything, I'm not the type of person who's going to, tweet at a player or, say something nonsensical about them. Same with coaches. I think there's a way to criticize what's going on without, attacking them personally or, saying they suck. I mean, that's people who do that. I mean, if you're somebody who watches this show and you do that, I mean, honestly, there's probably not very many of you, if any, that watch this show or comment on this show that do that sort of thing, because I don't really have that type of audience in my comments, and I can appreciate that. It's like many, if not all of you, are very level-headed with everything. But for those who do, and I'm probably, again, preaching to the choir right now, but for those who do, like, it's just not a good look, right? I don't even want to come off as preachy, and because many of you know that, as I said, preaching to the choir. But if things get bad enough to where people are personally attacking players and that sort of thing, then that's a new low. And I know fans are booing, and that's, again, it's like I said, it comes with the territory, especially with with the students and people who have maybe they come into the game and they've had a couple drinks, as people say. Hopefully they're drinking responsibly, but hey, we all know what a couple of drinks can do to some people. And I'm not saying everybody's an angry drinker, but whenever, the drinks are flowing and the emotions are high, you never know what might happen at a sporting event. Hopefully nothing harmful to anyone, of course. But people will say things that they probably wouldn't normally say if they weren't under the influence. And that might be why you see some of the exaggerated maybe exaggerated isn't the best word. Maybe it is, who knows? But maybe that's why you see all of the, people responding to the situations the way that they are during the games. So, Mike, I appreciate the comment. And, I also appreciate you not feeling like, again, I wasn't asking you to bash the coach or the players, but I appreciate you wanting to kind of hold back for all of this. But yeah, appreciate your comment as always. I feel like I'm giving a cheers, a toast every time I say that and take a drink. But let's move on to Justin Beard. He commented on last show as well. And this is a follow-up, I believe. He says, well, my comment about the Purdue game did age like milk. It hurts to be where we are. There are so many things to point to, but I think it comes down to bad decisions and hires within the athletic department over the years. There aren't many more explanations. Crean was a good hire for where Indiana was. Archie wasn't. Woodson wasn't. Change the way people think. I didn't realize I didn't read more. Change the way people think in this program. Yeah, and I think a lot of people have kind of begun to change the way they think about, what expectations should be. And I think a lot of that, when you're coming off of the football season that happened, and again, I feel like I'm coming full circle with a lot of things, or, just kind of repeating myself. But when you've seen all of the success with football and how quickly things can turn around and how easy it should be to do something similar, if not close to it, with basketball in 1 year, then I think people have already kind of seen that can happen. That's why you've seen the frustration, and people were frustrated last year for the similar results, but even more so now because nothing's changed. You have flipped the roster over the offseason. You thought you put the pieces together to be successful. And again, maybe the pieces fit, but they don't have the right puzzler. That is the person putting them together. Maybe the person trying to put the puzzle pieces together just isn't very good at solving puzzles. And that sounds like a very juvenile way of putting it, but that's kind of what it is. I think you could probably give this roster to a number of different head coaches, and you'd get some different results. And that's unfortunate because I bought into things getting turned around this year. I didn't know what the ceiling truly was, but we had all set expectations at being near the top of the Big Ten and really kind of seeing what can happen moving forward. And that's just not where we are. So, but yeah, I guess more so with your comment, you mentioned Crean was a good hire for where Indiana was. Yeah, Tom Crean, for the state of where basketball was and where Indiana was, like, there wasn't a better person to get Indiana out of the issues that they were in. And it's even crazier to think about when you look back on it. The things that Kelvin Sampson was fired for are so minute compared to what coaches can get away with nowadays. And I say get away with, a lot of it's legal, right? And even the illegal stuff that other coaches in like the SEC and football were able to do, like Ed Orgeron with LSU, and being able to put the roster they did together, never bat an eye. And then they put together one of the best college football teams in history, go undefeated and beat everybody's ass. I mean, yeah, I thought that LSU team was fun to watch, but what is that? The McDonald's bags, or was that might have been LSU, but it might have been a different head coach. I know his last name is Wade. Will Wade. That might have been him. Either way, I know Ed Orgeron, I believe, did some shady stuff. Maybe I'm wrong. Don't quote me on that. Maybe I'm spewing nonsense. I always second guess myself if I don't have the facts directly in front of me, even if I've heard it to be true once before. That's just the nature of being here on an island sometimes by yourself, discussing all these things. It's easy. Imagine it should be very easy to go crazy in this sort of environment, right? You're just sitting here talking to yourself and, hoping that what you're saying people respond to, or, kind of get your message, whatever it may be. And we're not talking about anything serious here. We're talking about college athletics, right? So it's not that big of a deal when it's all said and done. But yeah, thanks again for the comments. And if you want to leave a comment, about anything moving forward, you can always do that on this episode, subsequent episodes, whatever it may be. And we'll get into a couple of other non-IU basketball related things real quick. I'm also going to take I'm going to take a break again. It's more, I want to mention one thing, and this is not sports related really in any way, shape, or form, but it's something that I want to just kind of briefly talk about how cool it is, just because I saw this today, really just a few hours ago as of this recording. I'll start from here. I've been really getting into old Black Sabbath music over the last few months. And what do you know? Today, it was announced that the original 4 Black Sabbath members, Ozzy Osbourne, Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward, are going to play one final reunion show this summer in July up in their home country. I believe it might even be their hometown. And I just think that's one of the coolest things, especially right now for me as somebody who is really just getting into some of their, their old stuff. I mean, everybody knows the hits, Paranoid, War Pigs, Iron Man, that sort of thing. But I'm talking about like really doing a deep dive into their old albums and that sort of stuff. I hadn't done that before. And many of you guys know I'm a big rock and roll guy, but there's so much music out there. You can't really, it's hard to get around to it. So I make my rounds with different bands here and there. And I just so happen to be consuming a lot of Black Sabbath right now. And it's just cool to see that, with the timing of that and seeing that them doing a reunion show, not that I'm going to go over, but like, if they happen to live stream it or something, or, even if there isn't a live stream, I'm sure there'll be some videos of it posted. It'll be nice to see, them have one last performance playing some of their, I'm sure hits, deep cuts, whatever it may be, and all the other bands that are going to be there along with them. I just thought that was a pretty cool announcement. So, yeah, and that's another thing too. As we get into the off season, and I know we're not there yet, but as we mentioned, this being the Indiana basketball funeral, it does kind of feel like we are not running out of things to talk about. That's what I almost said. I'm like, that's the dumbest thing you can say. But we're getting, as we get closer to the off season, I mean, yeah, we're always going to cover sport. It's always going to be sports first, but there will be moments where I like to talk about some non-sports related things here and there, like what I just did. And hopefully you guys are okay with that. And I've had some people comment here and there on past episodes, like, not to mention that sort of thing, or not to go in too deeply on non-sports related topics. And I get it. I'll try not to veer off into that realm super often. And that's what the Out of Touch podcast is for as well. And by the way, we'll have our first episode in 2 months release tomorrow, actually, on the Out of Touch Media YouTube channel. So if you want more of me and Mitchell Page, and Dustin Schutte is usually with us as well, he's not with us on this episode, then go check that out. That's where most of the non-sports related things, that's where you can find most of that. But yeah, I just wanted to share that just because we had already recorded our Out of Touch this week, and so I didn't really have much of an outlet to share that. And plus, I've also got some extra time to fill today without having a guest on. So just wanted to share that. Maybe none of you care, but if you do, actually, I am curious if there are people who saw that news today, and it's intriguing to see that Black Sabbath is doing one final show. Let me know. Because they're pretty cool, right? They're the inventors of heavy metal, if you're into that sort of thing. But we'll move on from that, and if you do comment on it though, I'll be sure to shout you out next episode if that is something you're into. But we'll go ahead and move on and continue on with the rest of the show. Let's transition over to a little bit of Indiana football news, shall we? There was a couple of some late signings that came in earlier this afternoon, and I don't know if these, I was trying to figure out for sure, I don't know if these are scholarship signings or if they are walk-ons, but nonetheless, both good news, I would say, especially one in particular. We'll start with 3-star quarterback. I guess if you're a 3-star, that means you are, you're not just a walk-on, I wouldn't think. But quarterback Jacob Bell out of Naperville, Illinois. He's committed to Indiana, and be nice to add some depth, of course, to the quarterback position. So that'll be good for, I guess, especially when you consider that Tyler Cherry has transitioned to being a player coach of sorts this upcoming fall. A nice little late addition for the Hoosiers quarterback room. And then this is a pretty cool one, too. A linebacker. It is the brother of one Mikhail Kamara. It is Amari Kamara, class of 2025 at Stonebridge out of Ashburn, Virginia. And this one looks more walk-on-ish than the previous, but maybe I'm wrong. Either way, it has to be cool for Mikhail Kamara to be able to have his younger brother on the roster this upcoming season. And maybe he ends up turning into something that could, or someone that could be a contributor down the line. But who knows? Either way, I'm sure it'll be a good experience for especially, I'm sure Amari Kamara saw what happened this past season, watching his brother play on the best Indiana football team in history. Can we say that now? I don't even know if that's something that we ever really think about. And what is interesting when you look at what Indiana did, like a lot of them, when you look at the record and they didn't bring any, let's just say they didn't bring any trophies back to the stadium with them. They brought their 2 rivalry trophies back. But this team didn't win a bowl game. They didn't win the conference. They didn't win a division. They didn't do any of that sort of thing. They didn't play in previous seasons. Indiana would have played in a bowl game, a New Year's Six bowl. I don't know which one that would have equated out to be. I'm sure there's simulations out there that could have told you which bowl game Indiana likely would have been in with that type of season. But there's nothing to you have the college football playoff, of course. That is an accomplishment. I don't want to act like that's nothing, but you don't get a trophy for going to the college football playoff is what I'm trying to get at. This team will always be known as the college football playoff team until there are more teams that do that. I guess that's really what I'm trying to say. And they'll always, I guess, will the argument always be was this team better than the Rose Bowl team? I mean, the Rose Bowl team back in the 60s, they won 9 games, but I don't know exactly. Again, here I am doing research while I'm doing the show. But the 1960 team, 64 team, I should say, what was their final record? Was 9-1, because I know back then you also didn't play nearly as many games in a season. And here we go. It's not 1964, 1967. They were 9-2. So again, you kind of on equal footing with this year's Indiana team, 11-2. And of course, circumstances night and day difference with 67 and 2024 into 25, I guess you could say, even though they didn't play in the year 2025. But yeah, I guess is that going? Not that I don't know how debated it would be, but I'm sure maybe back in the day, those who saw that Rose Bowl team will say that the Rose Bowl team for Indiana was better than the 11-2 CFP team. Who knows? But I mean, I'll gladly say that what happened in 2024 is the best Indiana Hoosiers football team of all time. And that's a cool thing to think about, but it's also kind of sad because it's also a realization that you haven't had a lot of success over the years. If you're Ohio State or really any of the blue bloods in college football, this is just another. If you do a season like Indiana, sometimes it's seen as a letdown. I mean, look at Ohio State. Had they not made their run to the national championship, they were ready to throw Ryan Day off the side of a boat before all that happened. And now he's a title winner, which is, I'm curious. That just shows how crazy fans are in general. And that's why I always second guess, are we overreacting to things sometimes? Because I'm not even talking for football right now. I'm kind of diving my way back into basketball. Right now, I don't think we're overreacting. But the craziest fan bases in every side of every sport, at the first sign of things going wrong, it's just like everybody abandon ship, throw the captain overboard. And that's what Ohio State fans were ready to do after they lost to Michigan at home. And yeah, it's you don't want to, that wasn't the best Michigan team that they lost to. But you can't, like, maybe this is just something I'll never understand because I don't, we're not fans of Ohio State football. We don't, and maybe some of you do still understand it still, but it's one of those things like where I look at how, the expectations are so lofty every single year. Like if you can't meet expectations, then man, we've got to figure out what's wrong and we've got to fire somebody. That's always the answer. Just fire somebody until we figure it out. Fire Ryan Day. I'm just curious. Those who were so adamant about that, and then he wins a national championship. I mean, it had to be, that honestly doesn't happen very often. Like Ohio State bouncing back the way that they did to win the national title, it's one of the better championship stories in college football ever, I feel like. Maybe that's a shallow thing to say. Maybe many of you could throw better examples out there. But when you look at where they were and where you thought the season was going, and then it turns around and you're able to get to the pinnacle, win the entire thing, and really kind of look like you deserve to be there the entire time during the playoffs, that's also what makes this new 12-team playoff so amazing. That Ohio State team would not have been anywhere near the 4-team playoff had they not expanded the field this past season. I mean, they were the 8th seed. And yeah, that kind of sucked for Oregon, but I mean, that's what happens when you lose to Michigan, right? Maybe you'll get some reseeding and stuff like that in the future, so you don't have that matchup, work out the way that it did. But hey, that's where we're at, right? With college football. So yeah, those are, I guess, I don't know how we got to Ohio State, but we did. But we were talking football, and I guess before we wrap things up here, we're near the 45-minute mark, which again, usually these shows are closer to the longer side or closer to an hour, but without a guest, and I'm just sitting here rambling. And I'm about to use the term again. I don't want to run out of things to talk about. I've hit on all the heavy hitters, and I don't just want to find things to talk about it. But I guess we can go over some of the results from around the Big Ten and look ahead to some of the games later on before we get to the weekend. A couple of upsets. I'll tell you what, UCLA getting the best of Michigan State's a heck of an upset. Not that UCLA is like a bad team by any stretch of the imagination, but that's now both West Coast teams who are able to get the best of Michigan State. I don't know if both of them were on the road or not. I think they were. But yeah, tough trip for Tom Izzo and the Spartans. Last night I did have a parlay that didn't hit, and it was actually looking decent for a little bit. I took Iowa to cover against Purdue. They kind of blew it late, unfortunately, and then I thought Penn State -7.5 against Minnesota was free money. I was a little too confident in that because Minnesota won outright in that game. But I tell you what, though, I was doing so well betting college football. I've fallen off, though, with basketball season, especially now that I can bet on the Super Bowl this Sunday, and we'll talk more Super Bowl on Friday. But once that's done, I'm going to have to, if I keep losing in college basketball, I'm just going to have to hang it up for the year, because I'm still ahead on my betting like total from the beginning of the year until now, and I don't want to go back to even, because then I'll just feel like whenever you break even, like, yeah, that's cool, you had fun along the way, but there's part of you that looks back and you're like, wow, I went through all of that just to come away with nothing. You like to make a little bit of a profit, even if it is a small profit. So hopefully we can get back to some winning ways. But looking ahead, here's tonight's Big Ten slate. Oregon at Michigan. Michigan favored by 8.5. Oregon's a decent team. They've just kind of fallen off a little bit. So again, that's almost a stay away for me. Number 23, Illinois at Rutgers. Illinois, again, really good team, but they've had some questionable results. Now, Rutgers, outside of their 2 star freshmen, they're kind of doo-doo. So maybe it's better to bet the over in this game, 156.5, because both Illinois and Rutgers I believe they both score a lot. I know Illinois scores a lot. I know Rutgers freshman. Maybe I should just do some prop bets on Ace Bailey or Dylan Harper or something. The Nebraska at Washington. To tell you the truth, I don't know a single thing about Washington. And maybe I shouldn't admit that. Couldn't tell you a single player. Couldn't tell you. I was going to say I couldn't tell you their head coach. I think Danny Sprinkle. He's the head coach of Washington right now, right? What a freaking name, too, by the way. Danny Sprinkle. How? I feel bad for anybody who has to grow up with a last name that is something like that, whether it be Sprinkle or Tinkle, or it reminds me of the race car driver Dick Trickle. Like, that's not a real name. How in the world? And I know if your first name is Dick, then your name is Richard. Like, I understand that, but if that's the case, why are you? And heck, I was trying to Wikipedia him right now. There's no way that was okay. Yes, his name is Richard Leroy Trickle. That's his full name. So I guess the guy just wanted to embrace it and go by Dick Trickle. Didn't expect to be ending the show with jokes like that, but nonetheless, here we are. But yeah, Danny Sprinkle. About the only thing I could tell you about Washington's team in general. But yeah, them in Nebraska. Nebraska favored by 1.5. Again, I don't feel comfortable leaning either direction because I don't know anything about Washington. And then I guess if we're looking ahead to Thursday's slate, since we won't have a show between now and then, Maryland and Ohio State. That's what I hate. Another thing I hate about college basketball betting, you don't get spreads until the day of. But I would assume, even though Maryland's been on a tear, I think Ohio State might be favored by a point and a half here. And I think Maryland's eventually going to not run out of gas per se, but I think they'll eventually hit a bump in the road. They can't keep winning all these road games. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm dead wrong on that. Maybe they go on a tear and they end up being one of the better teams in the Big Ten. But if maybe my bet for the next couple of days will be Ohio State to cover and/or beat Maryland. If Maryland's favored, I may just take Ohio State money line and see what happens there. But we'll go ahead and leave it at that. This has been a good time. I know this has been a kind of a different style of episode, no guests, and hopefully I'll be able to make it up to you guys on Friday with a couple of different guests. Again, no promises. I'll do whatever I can. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this nonetheless, and we'll be back to do it all again on Friday. Be sure to subscribe to Hoosier Illustrated if you enjoyed this and enjoy all the other content going on the site. And do I have an alarm going off? Yeah, sorry. As I'm wrapping up the show, I have some random alarm going off on my phone. But nonetheless, subscribe on Hoosier Illustrated. Hit that notifications toggle if you want to be notified whenever we post a video, go live, that sort of thing. And be sure to check out, of course, everything going on at HoosierIllustrated.com with our amazing staff of writers, Kyler Staley, Alec Lasley, Dylan Traeger, Drew Rosenberg, wonderful staff of dudes that do a great job covering Indiana basketball, football, and much more. So until Friday, this has been another edition of In Touch with Indiana Sports, powered by HoosierIllustrated.com.